Hello, this is Philip Tirone with Evergreen Financial Counseling, talking with attorney Shawn Defries. Shawn, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Phil. Nice to
Good to
see you.
have you. Bankruptcy explained. What's your best option? With Evergreen, we get people contacting us all the time regarding their debt. I'm buried with debt. I can barely make the payments. My credit score is going down. Is bankruptcy my best option?
Yeah, initially, I'd say for 90% of those callers, Phil, bankruptcy is the best option. These are people that already have either credit card debt, medical debt, eh, repossessions, loans that are just skyrocketing and they can never get in. Or, my favorite caller is, and some of the listeners may not like this, but my favorite caller is the one that's been working with a debt consolidation company.
Yeah.
And they paid tens and tens of thousands of dollars and they still have debt and they're still getting sued.
Yeah.
That's when bankruptcy can really relieve them and alleviate some of that pain.
So let's unpack this a couple ways. First of all, 90% of the people that contact you. And that's about right with us. I mean, we look at the different options. You can look at debt validation, you can look at debt settlement, you can look at not paying your debt because of your age or whatever, and then you look at bankruptcy. And 90% of the time, bankruptcy the fit. And it does boil down to this emotional complex that for some reason people think that bankruptcy is like a ball and chain. You're going to be stuck on it forever. You're not going to improve your credit score. You won't be able to buy a car. You won't be able to buy a home, which are all misconceptions we can talk about in a second. So that's the first thing. Second thing is these people that come with debt settlement, right? I mean, with debt settlement, you're paying 25, 35, 45, 50% of your debt, and it takes months, sometimes years, right?
Let's not
Why
forget the
do
cut that the company's taken.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. And but why do people go down that road? I mean, because that's what boggles me. Why are they going down that road as opposed to looking at the options?
That's a great question, Phil. And I'm going to give a shout out real quick. You said let's unpack this. As you
Yeah,
may know, and some of our listeners know, my podcast is called Law Unpacked. So that's a perfect question for me.
thank you.
And they should check me out
Great.
and check out some of that Law Unpacked
Highly
videos.
recommend
But,
it.
but going back, really, again, it's that emotional stigma that bankruptcy is the last resort. And it really shouldn't be the last resort. It should be the first resort. They really need to get educated on what bankruptcy is and how it can help them. And that I think is going to really help some of these individuals that are suffering because they're getting all these collection calls and all these horrible things are happening to them because of debt.
And
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 having
and
that weight lifted off of them, it's night and day.
and Sean, let's talk about what bankruptcy is. Let's explain it for a second, right? So basically, bankruptcy is when you contact all your creditors and you say, "Wait, time out. I'm starting the bankruptcy process. You can't report me late. You can't collect on me. You can't do anything of that, right? That's the first step. Is that right?
That is the first step. And really, if we're talking about the bankruptcy process for the individual consumer, you're primarily looking at one of two things, either a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13. I like to say the Chapter 7 is the gold standard of bankruptcy. And that's the one that everybody talks about. And we try and fit all of our clients, if possible, into that Chapter 7. And that's where they're going to completely wipe away all of your debt that is including credit cards, medical bills, personal loans. Now, it doesn't include everything. There are back due taxes that sometimes can't be included in student loans, past due alimony and child support. But 90% of why people are getting the phone calls and why they're emotionally told from debt is solved in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
So
Now,
once that's solved, like the creditors stop calling, no more late payments. What does that process look like?
sure. Starts with the filing of, well, initially telling your creditors that you've hired an attorney to file bankruptcy. Once you've told them that you've hired an attorney, they are no longer able to contact you any further.
By
They
law.
have to by law,
By law.
by law. And if they do, you let your attorney know because then they're committing FDCPA violations, and there's a good possibility they might be able to file suit for those violations. But once they have said that I've hired an attorney and you need to contact them, the calls stop. But they'll come back if you don't actually move forward with a bankruptcy. So then the next step is getting all the documentation needed to get you filed. what do the courts require? And you're looking at 6 months of pay stubs, your last 2 years of tax returns. And really, that's a big hiccup is the tax return. So, one of the first steps I always tell my clients is get your taxes done, make sure your taxes are
Hmm.
current. You're allowed to owe taxes in bankruptcy, but you have to have those returns filed in order to file bankruptcy. They're going to look at, a list of creditors. And as you know, Phil, not all creditors, we're going to pull a credit report, but not all creditors are on your credit report because you get medical bills. And oftentimes, until they're in collections, they don't go on the credit report. Especially one thing that we're seeing is a hot button right now are those buy now and pay in 90 days,
Yeah, right.
where
The
all that initial stuff,
karma or whatever.
yeah, absolutely. Where all that stuff isn't reported on your credit report because it's a buy now, pay in 90 days. Well, that's still debt that you have that should be included into your
So
bankruptcy.
all those things, if you get caught up into these type of buy now, pay in 90 days, I mean, we've seen people with thousands and thousands of dollars, all that. That's all dischargeable, like gone. What
Absolutely.
happens? What happens to the product though? So
But
you're
here's what I want to warn
yeah.
consumers. Don't go ahead and say, I'm going to file bankruptcy today and
Mhm.
then go do the buy now, pay later tomorrow because, then you're committing bankruptcy fraud and you don't
Yeah,
want to do that.
right.
But there are often times that there are thousands of dollars in these buy now, pay laters that aren't reported.
Yeah. So, but like, what happened to the product? So, if let's just say someone buys something worth $3,000 and it's pay over the next 6 months or whatever, and you file bankruptcy, what happened to the product that the
Most of the
person?
time, the depending on how much that product is worth, it remains with our clients.
Oh, it does. Okay, so they don't have to give it back.
Only in rare circumstances will that creditor come for that product back, but most of the time that product just lowers in value
Yeah,
the moment. It's like when we talk about when you buy a brand new car, right?
yeah,
You drive off the lot and that car is going to depreciate $5,000 the moment you drive it off the lot.
right.
Same thing with, a lot of these consumables that people are using this buy now, pay later for. Once they actually have it, they use it. Well, it's not worth as much as it was when they were to purchase it. So it doesn't make sense for the creditor to try and come back for that.
So what we're talking about is in the step one, once again, bankruptcy explained. Step one is all your creditors notified, stop calling. And how long does it take for someone to put together documentation? Like more or
Yeah.
less. You
So
think five
yeah,
hours, 10 hours? Like what are
no,
we?
no, no. So and Philip, I don't want to sugarcoat this.
Yeah,
I like
don't
to tell my
sugarcoat.
clients the
Thank you.
hardest part about filing bankruptcy
Yeah.
is the document collection.
How long does it take?
Now,
More or less.
if you're organized, you
Mhm.
can get it done in an hour. If you know all your bank accounts,
Okay.
login information, if you know how to
Give
pull your
me
tax
worst
return,
case scenario. Worst case.
maybe 3 hours, maybe.
Okay, so 3 hours.
But
So
but
okay,
but
that
here's
no,
here's where the 3 hours are, right?
yeah.
The 3 hours means you have to go and drive to the bank and ask them for the last 6 months of your statements. You have to drive to whoever did your taxes and ask them for their
Love it.
two years of tax returns. That's usually your worst case scenario.
So
Most people have that.
work with me on this. Let's just pretend it's not 3 hours. Let's just say it's double that, 6 hours, because they have to file taxes or whatever. Your average bankruptcy client, how much debt are you discharging? Average.
As of about 6 months ago, Phil, I actually did this calculation, and
Okay.
I think my firm has discharged over 25 million in debt.
Wow.
If you look at what that numbers is, I think that's average about 50,000 per case that we've handled.
So
Um,
we check this out, Shawn. 15,000 average debt, some higher, some a little
no,
less.
no, 50,
Oh,
not 1 5.
5,000. Okay. So
50,
average
50,000. An average of
50,000.
50,000. Correct.
Okay.
Now we've had
Oh,
people that have had a couple 100,000. We have people that have, 20,000.
so let's just
But
even be more conservative. Let's take it down to 15. Like not 50, 15,000 divided by 6 hours. That's $2,500 an hour. Okay. Our normal client is making 25, 35, 45, 50 bucks an hour. This, like bankruptcy, if you look at it this way, you will never get paid higher for your time than you will by filing bankruptcy. By the amount you discharge divided by the hours it takes, it's going to be thousand, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 an hour, right? Have you ever thought about it like
absolutely,
that?
it's crazy to think about that. But Phil, I really think you have to go to that first step because we're thinking of this logically in a business
Yeah, right.
sense, right?
Right.
People don't think of bankruptcy logically in a business sense.
So,
They
okay,
think it's the,
let's go
and
back
that's,
to bankruptcy explained. We're starting at the very, very beginning, emotionally, right? Because that's the big thing. People don't step into it because they believe whatever they believe, the ball and chain, it's immoral, it's not right, I owe the debt. Fill in all the blanks, right?
and they
What else
don't
do you want to
realize,
talk? What else do you want to talk about that?
I mean, they don't realize that bankruptcy is a tool to help them. A lot of people file bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Thousands of people file every day, hundreds of thousands of people file every year, and millions of people have done it over their lifetime. You're not alone.
Hmm.
People have made that courageous step to get filed,
Yeah.
and they've seen that debt melt off of them.
Yeah.
But more importantly, those people also are the ones that have bought in cars, that have bought in new houses, that have recovered after that and have been very successful and lived a very successful life after they got over that hurdle that they had.
Yeah. Yeah. It shocks me that people think their bosses are going to find out. The practicality is no one's going to know. Like, yes, they can look, but when have you looked who filed bankruptcy? And frankly,
Yeah.
it's pretty complicated to do.
Well, what I like to say, I mean, everybody sees like a mug shot, right? When you
Yeah,
get
right.
arrested, somebody's going to see your mug shot. Whether if you're found guilty or innocent, somebody's going to see that mug shot. If
Right.
they Google you on the internet, that's going to come up. And bankruptcy, if you Google you on the internet, it's not going to come up.
Yeah.
Now, if you're looking at a bankruptcy website or the government's website to look at bankruptcy, it's going to come up. But most
If
of the
you
time,
know how to look at it, because I got to tell you, that website Pacer is really complicated.
well, and they charge you 10 cents per page.
Yeah,
So
right.
just to look at somebody's case, you're paying a couple dollars. And
Yeah,
is it really worth to do that? I think the moral of the story here is unless you tell people, yes, it's public record, but nobody's going to find out unless you disclose it to them.
well, and the other thing is you don't realize it yet. Most people don't really realize it yet, but a lot of your friends have filed bankruptcy, right? It really is something that's shockingly popular, but it just no one talks about it because it's not something you bring up at a dinner party.
Well, I mean, let's talk initially what got people into this spot. Nobody gets debt thinking that they're not going to be able to repay it.
Yeah,
But life happens.
yeah,
Somebody passed away and they no longer have that partner to share anymore. They lost their job that they had for 10 years because the economy isn't where it was. There are things that happen in people's life and they just need a reset, and that's where bankruptcy can come in and help.
yeah. The percentage of people that we find at Evergreen that take advantage of bankruptcy, meaning their serial bankruptcy plan, is very, very small. Like you said, it's the car accident, the loss of job, the death, where people are like, I don't know what to do. And that's where the fresh start comes. And it's not something that takes years to do. It's if you qualify for a chapter seven, it's a 90-day game and it's over. You start
Right.
rebuilding. And what people don't understand, you can buy a home 2 years after a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. You can have a 720 credit score 12 to 24 months after a bankruptcy. Evergreen gives all this to you, right? All these
And
resources.
Phil, you've seen this happen. If anybody,
Oh, yeah.
I've
Oh,
seen
yeah.
it happen. I know you've seen it happen. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. I
we're
mean,
not blowing smoke here. We actually have seen people be able to buy a house within a couple of years after filing bankruptcy.
I know it
People getting a
works.
car with upon filing bankruptcy. That's a whole nother thing. People, one of the big stigmas is I don't want to lose my car and I can't. And all but maybe I want to say 99% of my cases, people have either kept their car or they've been able to get a new car after bankruptcy.
Well, because
Those
the
that
government,
haven't,
yeah, go ahead.
I would say those that haven't don't have didn't have the means to be able to afford a car payment. So, but if there's a vehicle available and they need one to work, typically they can buy one right after bankruptcy.
The government wants you to drive to work, obviously. That's why the bankruptcy code's written this way. And when you say after bankruptcy, you're talking one day after filing. This isn't
Correct.
2 to 3 years. Most likely, debtors that are or people in debt that are listening to this message may have cars that they haven't changed their oils, bald tires, because if you don't have the money to pay your bills, you don't have the money to change your oil. Imagine getting a fresh start on a new car the day after you file. This is what happens. So let's go back to Shawn, what explaining the bankruptcy process. So you notify that you first of all, you understand, like you said, I love that part of it. The first step is understanding emotionally that you're not
Once
alone.
you get over that emotional hurdle,
Yeah.
and it is a hurdle, and I'm not here to say that it doesn't take an initial toll on people and they have to come to terms with it themselves, that this is a tool used for a fresh start.
Mm.
It's a tool. That's what it is. It's not the end of the world. It's a tool.
Yeah.
Once you get that, then we can notify the creditors that you've hired an attorney and that you are ready to proceed with filing bankruptcy. From there, it's getting the documentation, making sure your taxes are filed, getting the documentation needed to get filed. You get filed. About 30 days after that, you'll have a meeting with the U.S. trustee, the appointed trustee in your case. People ask, who is a trustee? I like to say, if you've ever seen any kind of Law and Order show, the trustee is the one on the other side. You have your prosecutor and your defendant. Now, a trustee is not a prosecutor. The trustee's job is to look at all of your assets and everything that you have to ensure that you don't have anything of value that can be used. And of value would be things that aren't exempt. And that's a whole nother conversation that we can get into here in a little bit. But anything of value that they can use to pay your creditors. And that's the trustee's job. And most of the time, and again, 90% of my clients, the answer is no, there is nothing to pay the creditors. And they move forward in about 90 days after that meeting of creditors or meeting with the trustee. Their debt gets discharged, their case closes, and they move on. But each state has what we call exemptions. And so I'm here in Florida. In Florida, you're allowed to keep $5,000 in equity in a vehicle, up to $3,000 of personal property. So that could be assets in a bank account, engagement ring, whatever that may be, up to $3,000. What is great about Florida, it has an unlimited homestead exemption. So that means your primary residence, assuming obviously you're not facing foreclosure and everything's up to date, it could even be paid off, is exempt from creditors in the bankruptcy
Mm.
process.
Mm.
And so you could have $1 million house that you've had in the family for generations. That's all paid off. There's no mortgage. Creditors cannot come after that house within the bankruptcy process.
Yeah. Fantastic. I mean, this is the way our bankruptcy laws are written, and every state has little nuances with regard to these exemptions or what can be included in
Every
bankruptcy.
state has exemptions or their
Yeah.
federal exemptions if they don't.
Okay.
But every state has their exemptions. They're very easy to find. A quick Google search will tell you what your state's exemptions are, and you can really kind of piece together. Another exemption here in Florida is that they can't touch, your retirement accounts,
Mm.
assuming that they've been there, from your employer and they've been there for a while. They can't touch them.
I believe
So you're
that. I
not
think
going to lose
believe
your
that's federal too, right? I mean, that's pretty standardized around the nation on
Right.
retirement.
So if we're talking federal and state, a state can choose whether to elect to use the federal code or the state code.
Oh, got it.
Uh,
Okay.
so Florida is the state exemption that qualifies as one of our state exemptions.
Got it.
But yeah, they're not going to take your retirement. They're not going to take your home. If you have more than $5,000 in equity in the vehicle, then, we're going to discuss that and see what options are there, but they're not going to take your vehicle if you have less than 5,000 in equity in it, at least here in Florida again. There's so many things that you get to keep through bankruptcy that it's a no-brainer really to file because you're not going to lose a lot of the stuff that you think that you're going to lose. And talk to an attorney. I mean, if you have questions, most attorneys will do a free consultation and
Right.
they'll tell you, whether or not you qualify for a Chapter 7 or you qualify for the Chapter 13, which we haven't really gotten into yet.
And and then the last step of it, once you go to the meeting of creditors and after the 90 days, then is the final discharge, right? Can you speak into that?
Yeah, so the final discharge is when your debt officially becomes discharged. Now, throughout that 90 days, there's a hold in place. So your creditors can't, again, once you tell them you're filing for bankruptcy, they can't continue to call you, to harass you. You're in that zone. They can't do that. So they're not going to be able to do that. But once that discharge comes, that your credit report is wiped of those debts that were included in the bankruptcy, and they can no longer come after you at a future date.
It's illegal to report late payments, right? If they do come after you, you contact your attorney and they're going to sue them for coming after you, right? There's just so much more protection a client who've gone through bankruptcy has because of the laws that are written.
Well, Phil, you brought up a good point. I mean, bankruptcy in the Chapter 7 is really about that fresh start.
Yeah.
Now, when we say a fresh start, it's because your credit report essentially gets wiped clean, right? So there's nothing on there after bankruptcy, which is why Evergreen Counseling offers the 7 steps to build a 720 credit score and other programs like that to be able to really rebuild and start putting good stuff on your credit report. So that's how you buy the house in a few years and get a better interest on that vehicle that you want. All that stuff really is important that you continue to follow through with that after you file bankruptcy.
Well, and also we get a common thing on at Evergreen is I don't have a clean credit report. How do I get the bankruptcy off the credit report? You don't need to get off the credit report. It's going to be on the credit report. It doesn't really matter. And frankly, a common misconception, it's going to impact my job, but it's not going to because even though that bankruptcy is on your credit report, you're going to rebuild around the bad credit to easily build to a 720 credit score in 12 to 24 months after that.
Yeah, real quick, Phil. I
Yeah,
will say that most of the time when we pull somebody's credit report, it's going to say what their score is now and what the likelihood is after they file bankruptcy. And it's
fantastic.
really great. And that's without following the 7 steps to a 720 credit score. And you can immediately see that jump in the future. So,
Fantastic.
uh, again, thanks, Phil, for having me at my podcast, or you can come check my YouTube channel. It's Law Unpacked. And I have a lot of great pointers on bankruptcy. I've had Phil on there, some other great folks that we work with. Adrian Hines, the Ladylike Lawyer, is a great friend of ours. And so come check out our channel. And remember, bankruptcy is not the end of the world. It's a tool used for a fresh start.
Absolutely. And if you are living in Florida and you need an attorney, Shawn Defries, he can file statewide in Florida and is there for a free consultation, as we've said. Thank you, Shawn.
Thanks, Phil.